Ready when you are, CB. Do I start in Canada or Mexico?
It's me and Animal Kingdom.
We really hate us?
Disney trips to wrestling and all that's in between. On the MIC, it's the KEY to recall what we see. Like a magic trick can take you back, so open sesame. Come with us, we'll take a ride through epic memories. That nostalgia that hits your heart and gets you every time. That do you remember? Makes you laugh and sometimes makes you cry. It's the pops, the shows, the shops. Frank and Jen don't stop. Welcome everybody to Dillo's Pop.
This is Dillo's Pop. On a Monday morning, it is September the 23rd at the YouTube channel. We're here at on the YouTube channel this morning.
This is what we're doing. We're starting our week off with YouTube.
It's been an awfully long time since we've done an episode of Dillo's Pop, but here we are amidst our summer of we were tripping here and tripping there and meet-upping in a third location. So now we're like, oh, we got to do a Dillo's Pop, and for good reason.
Yes, for sure. It's going back to the mid-2000s.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So yesterday, on September the 22nd, it was the 20th. When I posted this video originally, I posted 15th. No, it is the 20th anniversary of the TV series Lost. We, both of us, were fully invested in the series from 2004 to the spring of 2010. And yeah, there is kind of that little inside joke there. If you listen to Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz each week, where when we talk about Disney, we talk about the mid-2000s, where we don't remember a whole lot about that time. So you could say, in some ways, in our own ways, that we were also lost while watching Lost.
A little bit.
I thought Jen talked about whether during the meetup in Walt Disney World, whether some of that time would be discussed. It was not.
I didn't find the right opportunity.
No.
But one day, maybe.
If you go to DillosDizResort.com, I don't know, is that still there? I won't say it. But DillosDizResort.com, that's our Patreon with memberships beginning as low as $1 per month. DillosDizResort.com. If you go there, why don't I see the banner that I usually put across the screen? Because it is right there. That right there is like a Mama Dillo recording. Is that still out there? Where she reveals one of the secrets of the mid-2000s. I'm just saying, if you need incentive.
That's true. She does a little bit. It's not like a specific.
No.
But there is a story with some more details. Yeah, that's there somewhere.
That's at DillosDizResort.com. But part of this, and it's going to be hard because we know some people who are listening or watching or whatever you're doing have not watched the series before, and thus beginning the binge on Netflix. So we are going to navigate around spoilers, I think. And hopefully, I have one spoiler for the end that I at least know Jeffers will have to close his ears and eyes for. But I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it at the beginning, and I was like, no, I'm gonna do it at the end because I gotta.
Because we've started the rewatch now, and maybe this kicks off a longer rewatch for Lost. How many episodes have you done as of this recording for the rewatch?
Right. So we discussed watching the first 4 episodes, which would take you to Walkabout in season 1, which the pilot, everyone talks about the greatness of the pilot, the most expensive pilot at the time produced for television. I thought it was a 2-hour thing when it first aired, but it was 2 separate, like they show on Netflix. Every time I'm like, I don't remember it being split, but I guess it was.
But maybe not. And maybe Netflix did that, because I had read that too, like the 2-hour premiere. And I was like, Wait, but it's 2 separate episodes on here.
No, well, and I read a article this morning from Jeff Jensen, who back in the day on
Yes.
entertainmentweekly.com was Doc Jensen, who would deep dive into every possible clue and scenario, which
Yes.
just waited for that article every week.
Yeah.
That he said that it was the 22nd and the 29th. And I was like, oof, no recollection of that.
No, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely no. That's 2004. Forget it.
But
Yeah.
we talked about let's do up to episode 4 because Walkabout ends so strong. Like if you loved the pilot and was action and you were like, whoa, this is completely different.
Yeah.
By the end of the 4th episode, where you saw really how deep they were going to go with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, I mean, that was the first, like, okay, you learned a little bit about Jack, you learned a little about Kate in those first, but when you got to that 4th episode with Locke,
Mm-hmm.
you were like, what am I watching? What
Yeah.
what is happening right now? And just the way they weave the story and give you the hints and bring you along in those first 4 episodes are amazing. But your question was, how many episodes have I watched so far? And the answer is 7. 7
Okay.
episodes. Yeah.
Listen, I was gonna watch the 4, but I've also started Only Murders in the Building, and you know what? I can't do all the things, and so I've only watched 1. But I will bring up. I'm gonna have the refreshers over here in a tab so that I can refresh my brain for those first few episodes.
Wait, I mean, we can just talk about the pilot. That's not.
Yeah,
I mean, but the idea is for Jen and I, at least probably for the next several Dillo's Pop
mhm.
related, that we would revisit all the episodes of Lost and then maybe throw in Only Murders in the middle there.
Yeah.
Now that you're watching that, but where do you want to? Wait, why don't we just let's start at the very beginning? Where do you want to take it from, Jen?
Oh, my goodness. I'm trying to think if I remembered hearing about Lost coming out, because sometimes I remember seeing a trailer and being like, what is this? Like I remember that with This Is Us. I remember seeing This Is Us and going, oh, that looks like a show that I'm gonna love.
Right.
And I can't remember with Lost if I saw that trailer. I don't know if you remember seeing the trailer.
I probably just remember. I mean, there had to be a reason. I know I set my TV VCR combo recording to make sure I had it that first episode. But yeah, I don't remember the trailer, but I remember knowing that I was going to watch the show.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of where to begin, if I could just give an overall thought, and it kind of ties into something we mentioned on last week's Theme Park Thursday episode, where we talked about 9/11 a little bit, but briefly, that this show came out 3 years later. And I feel like in those first 3 years, maybe more so for New Yorkers, but probably for everybody, there were still tensions about flying and planes and all of that. And so to rewatch the pilot and see this plane crash was like, oh God, that had to be stressful to see that first time. But I did read a little fun fact, trivia thing about the plane, which it said that it cost $250,000 to ship the wrecked plane pieces to Hawaii. The wreckage was clearly visible to aircraft landing at nearby Honolulu Airport, so airlines were advised to tell concerned passengers that they were actually seeing a TV set. That's from IMDb. But yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, can you imagine flying into Hawaii and you just see this wreckage all over a beach?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I it's funny that we did talk about that last week, and then not really. I think what we haven't said out loud too about that is the reason why I started flying JetBlue was because for whatever reason JetBlue started making me comfortable about flying again, where I wasn't. I mean, maybe it was just the direct TV at the time, a distraction.
Yeah.
But it was hard. So yeah, it's seeing that, and it's still fresh. Yeah, it was still fresh, I think, in a lot of people's minds, and displaying that TV was intense. And Lewis is in the chat and he's talking. He's already jumped because he's already the thing that we'll talk about if we do multiple episodes of this with this rewatch is where you invested in the show.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the podcast, you've done the live streams, I'm a character guy. So the characters are first for me. So nothing about the show dissatisfied me ever, really. I
Yeah.
was never did it slow down at times? Did it not make sense at times? Did I go, where are they going at times?
Yeah.
No. But just like I read those Doc Jensen articles
Yeah.
every week, which will say, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I didn't sit there and go, oh, I hope it's this. I hope
Right.
it's that. I hope this is the answer. This is the best theory. I never did that with people who were talking about what happened. I was more invested in what would become of the characters.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting in the pilot, and obviously it's very Jack centric at the
Mhm.
beginning there in
Yes.
that first episode, but really how they approach, and it's obviously a gimmick, not a gimmick, I'm looking for a better word, but to say we're gonna do flashbacks of every character here, so you learn about everybody, but you never really got a show before that had a level of investment in every main character.
Mhm.
Uh, and Lewis is already, the characters didn't frustrate me. Listen, I was not of all the characters, and he was the lead. Like I just had to put Jack over here,
Mhm.
and I had to and focus on everybody else. And not until the final moment of the show where I was like, man, Jack was a great character. Like that was that,
Mhm.
because if you're somebody who and like me at the time, especially less so now, but back then definitely, who had a hard time yes ending the
Mhm.
things presented to him,
Yeah.
it related to him maybe a little too much. And so I was like, Jack, you're annoying me. Go over there.
Uh-huh.
Accept what's going, like just embrace the things and jump it. That's me. Like
Yeah.
and so that's the chief one. And I'll pass it back to you because I'm rambling already.
No, you're fine. Um, yeah, as I'm watching, because I have never rewatched anything. I have seen some clips along the way. But it was such a massive thing for us during that time and later in the seasons. And we had the box set DVDs. I think I've showed that somewhere else along the way. I don't know where that is right now, in a box somewhere in my house, but you know, watching the first episode, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, this happens with this person, or oh, I totally forgot about that or whatever it is. A lot of that was coming up of like, oh man, and then doesn't this happen? And then doesn't it go here? And you know, things I haven't thought about in the last 20 years, 15 to 20 years, that were popping up for me along the way, and thinking about where they went with some of the characters, and thinking about um, just the twists and turns some of them took, and then some of them you had wished you got more from and that you didn't get as much from, and all of that. And but so Lewis, I think you have a point that the characters frustrated the crud out of us at times, but also there, it it was interesting to watch, I think, along the way.
Yeah, and I think there's when you talk about character frustration, I think there's two ways you can go about it, where it's you get frustrated with the actions the characters take on the show.
Yeah.
And then there's this other part of dramatic television series, especially, where you get frustrated with the follow-up the writers producers take. And
Mhm.
and that part kind of got put tabled because of the concept of the show, where listen, if you're getting a Charlie centric episode, you better prepare for no follow-up on this character for a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
because they're going to do another character next week.
Right.
So if you got into that rhythm with the show, and I'm saying this because I did, I
Mhm.
wasn't like, oh my god, what's going to happen to Charlie next week? I was like, they might
Mhm.
not come back to this for a while, and I got to accept that.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? And I feel like more shows did that after. You were so used to having an episode of TV with a cliffhanger and the follow-up, whereas having just rewatched This Is Us over the
Mhm,
summer,
mhm.
they would always skip at least one episode, if not more, before they came back to some of the storylines. So I feel like that became more of a norm after Lost.
And I think what bothered me most about This Is Us, which I loved,
Yeah.
um, what bothered me most is that it was close to a concept that Lost was by its
Mhm.
very nature, but I carried the same level of anxiety about the characters that I did with Lost. When
Mhm.
spoiler, I didn't really need to have that level of anxiety when it came
Yeah.
to those characters. You kind of you knew some things, you knew where it was going, but yet every episode I was waiting for a shoe to drop with one of the
Mhm.
characters,
Yeah.
and that really, I mean, they did well by the end,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it was in the future at the end. You knew where it was going. You
Yeah.
knew that who was there and who wasn't there, and no spoilers elsewhere on This Is Us. But with Lost, you really, even if it started with a character arc in that episode, you didn't know what was going to happen to that character by the end of the show.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like, with certain characters, because they were maybe not meant to stay on for too long and then stayed on for longer, I
Yeah,
don't know that the writers always knew,
right.
in 1 episode versus 5 episodes from there, that there was going to be more with certain characters along the way.
And that's still really debated, I think, in general of what they didn't know what they wanted to do. So after season 3, they decided on 6 so that they could plot the course. Like, hey, that's all okay. That's part of the creative process.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just this is where it's naturally going. That doesn't mean you didn't know that's where it was going. Like, something presents itself,
Mhm.
chemistry between characters, something a character says, something that becomes a theme of the show that you didn't know was going to be a bigger thing, and smaller characters, right? Like, prior to Lost, I would say, you had The Sopranos from
Mhm.
99 to 2004 in those first 3 or 4 seasons. And you had the main characters, but what also The Sopranos did really brilliantly is introduce smaller characters, like I would say, introduce characters who became crucial later in earlier seasons as like a small, this person's just
Mhm.
starting out, this person is just a hostess, this person is just, and then they become like a key component in
Yeah.
season 5 and 6 of The Sopranos.
Yeah.
So those arcs were really
Yeah.
interesting, and so to that, when you watch Lost, you go, who's going to become the most interesting? And I think that was allowed. There were times that I thought Saeed should have become the most crucial part of
Yeah.
that show, like the most essential character on that show,
Yeah.
where I was like, I think this is the guy. I think
Mhm.
Saeed is the guy that
Mhm.
is, and it's not like Jack is a decoy
Yeah.
because he's a doctor and he's a thing, but I think Saeed is the guy that is really, it never really, and I mean, I think you can see the inconsistency of the character writing in there too, where
Mhm.
I think if they pushed in one direction sometimes, I think that character, almost like how Sawyer took off.
Yeah.
Like, later on, Sawyer takes off in a way that you're like, "Oh, I did not see this coming
Right.
at all."
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you got the scoundrel smuggler Han Solo type there in the
Mhm.
early episodes, but where he goes, his journey, his arc, his,
Yeah.
and kind of still staying true to that core character traits,
Yeah.
is really hard to do. And but how it would come and go, and people would come in and out, was really unique, and I think underappreciated sometimes because we're so focused on. If you're focused on answers for the
Uh-huh.
mysteries, you were frustrated with what was happening with the characters.
Yeah.
And that wasn't me. I was like, if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't come, it doesn't come. Or again, how is this? I was always, how is this ending?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The long haul.
The long
Um, Lewis was mentioning that the lack of rhythm we had mentioned has killed episodic TV and given rise to binge watching, because that sort of device works much better for a movie experience at a weekly show. Yeah. I mean, I think as I go through and rewatch so close together, I am, and maybe you've already experienced this being 7 episodes in,
Mhm.
the difference in binging versus watching week to week and having to
Yeah.
wait, because sorry to go back, but it's the biggest show that I have rewatched recently, which is This Is Us. But having the experience where I watched it week to week in real time and had to wait months in
Mhm.
between
Oh yeah.
seasons, or the writer strike or COVID or
Yeah.
whatever else
COVID.
happens, um,
Yeah.
I it was a much different experience binging it. Like, things that were popping up or connections I was able to make or callbacks I saw, I'm
Yeah.
like, I probably totally forgot about this the first time around because it had been 6 months since I saw anything or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see, rewatching Lost and having it so close together, like how that affects the watch experience of the show and if it changes like the feel of it or the rhythm of it or anything.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that is a bigger, when Lost ended,
Yeah.
Netflix was really just starting, in
Yes.
terms of the discs still and all. Like you went out and you bought the DVD seasons. You did that maybe, but and you binged them that way. But in the end, you were still, hooked into episodic TV. And at that time, through the 2000s, it was at least for the first 7 years, it was The Sopranos, and it was Lost, and maybe towards the end, it was Dexter. And that is something that has changed, and I don't know if it's for the better or not.
Mhm.
I think that if it's a way to help manage your day-to-day anxiety
Mhm.
because you're invested in a TV show with so much, which is great. We all need escapism,
Right.
but I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking. I had long drives to my job at the time.
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time thinking about Lost,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and that is something that I think came out of something like Lost, where the response was, we got a new system of television has to be created here,
Mhm.
and so it was nice when a show like This Is Us came along, where people flocked to weekly viewings of it
Yes.
rather than, I'm just gonna wait until you know it comes out in a season form,
Yeah.
on Hulu or Peacock or whatever else.
Yeah, and that's the debate now, right? Is how do you like watching your shows at this point? Because there are people, even if there is a new show to cable TV, they will wait until it's all done and then just go through and binge it and not deal with the waiting and the
Yeah,
seeing and all of it. And I mean, I think recently I don't think I've heard of a show that I'm like, "Ooh, I can't wait to see this." But
yeah,
if I did, I don't know that I could wait to binge it
yeah.
if I was excited about it, but I totally get wanting to do that. I mean, Val is mentioning that they binge watched Alias through the Netflix mail. That's the
Mhm.
thing too. In the last 20 years, the changes of TV
Yeah,
and how you watch shows and all of it, it's just so crazy. But with Lost, I feel like it it was such a different type of show than we had been used to. It wasn't your medical drama, it wasn't your comedy, it
yeah,
wasn't it just felt different, and, I mean, I think, for J.J. Abrams shows, a lot of them do feel different and have a certain flow to them and have a certain, have a way to keep you interested and keep you coming back and have a lot of character development that, yeah, it was something that we were pretty obsessed with at the
yeah.
time.
Pretty obsessed with. I mean, I think since we do a theme park Thursday podcast, that even at the time I was like, that Discovery Island over there. You want to turn that into like a Dharma Initiative station or something for like immersive experiences? Can you do that? Like
Right.
that's where my brain was back then.
I mean, I think it was where your brain was up until the last D23 announcements. You were still planning that for certain parts of the parks.
I was like, it's time. It's the 20th anniversary. Let's do it. Let's have an immersive experience on Discovery Island. Get all those animals over to the animal kingdom, whoever's living over there, and turn it into a Dharma station for crying out loud.
Imagine
Um,
when Animal Kingdom just becomes Indiana Jones, Lost, just all these random lands.
right. Yeah, that's all. I mean, yeah, I would have, before the recent announcement, I would have also taken that for Tom Sawyer Island. Like,
Yeah, right.
just,
Yes. Uh-huh.
just, I'm going to take the raft
Yeah.
that is built and then
Yeah.
go over to Tom Sawyer Island.
Since we're talking about Disney for one
Yep.
second, let me just throw out another fun fact. This is the only other fun
Yep.
fact I'll share since everyone can find them on IMDb. But the production budget for the 2 hour pilot, was it 2 hours? Was $12 million, far greater than the cost of most television shows. This led to Disney firing ABC Entertainment chair Lloyd Braun for greenlighting the show, which went on to become ABC's biggest hit in years.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big thing at the time, and what was interesting about it is the cycle in which it went. And they changed the model of how they did television too, because after that third season, they were like, we're not coming back in September. We're coming back in January, and we're going to go straight through week to week
Yeah.
to week. You're not going to get a repeat in between. Remember repeats? This week it's a repeat. It's a repeat.
Oh man.
It's like, forget it. I don't want to watch a repeat.
And now all I do is watch repeats of my favorite shows. It's basically what I do.
And that was it too, and that also influenced the model of which TV viewing was. And The Sopranos did that before later, but that was like how HBO shows were doing things. That was the first time a network television show really was like, we're a hit and we're coming back in January. We need to really take as much time as needed, which you appreciate.
Yeah.
Unless you didn't like the answers.
Right.
Which, again, it's hard when you know where you come from on all of that. Talk to us in the pilot, in that first episode that you watched. Like, what stood out to you? What were specific things that you were like, oh, that?
Yeah, I think it was interesting which characters got introduced and which you kind of saw a hint of, but then you don't really know much about. Locke, you don't really know anything about except that he smiled with an orange in his mouth. I mean, you don't really know much there. Sawyer, you don't really, they would focus in on them for like a second, but then you didn't get much from them. So they were creating the Jack, Kate, Charlie characters a little bit, where you kind of had a little bit more insight there, and then kind of getting these glimpses into other ones, which were making me remember other things. Like I'm blanking on their names, so I'm looking them up. Let me see. The Daniel Day Kim character and yes, Jin and Sun. That you saw them, and I'm like, oh, I forgot how they started and where they ended up.
Right.
Like, and like all came flashing back in that first episode. And I think just the hints of what the island is, and that this isn't a regular island, and that this isn't a regular place, and the sounds and the bushes moving, and you don't know what that is, and what happened to the pilot, who is what's his name, Greg
Grunberg,
who's in like all the JJ stuff. He was in Felicity, shout out. But he's all of that, but like, the 2 seconds he had and what happens to him, and it's like, what is happening? What is this place? And also made me go, can I get cheap flights to Hawaii? Obviously I was doing that as well, so
Lewis mentions about the lost immersive experience in theme parks that we all craved in the mid 2000s. Trying to make the smoke monster work is really. Listen, if there was a place I could go where the smoke monster would breeze through, I mean, that's as good as as a meeting Darth Vader and a meet and greet these days.
I mean, do you think it wouldn't be a universal thing, but at Halloween Horror Nights, a smoke monster house, just a lost house in general, of all the things,
going through the hatch, and then the smoke monster. It's a lot of spoilers for the end of words that Jeffers is like, I'm watching season 1.
Put in some numbers in order to get out of there.
So again, we can't mention characters that aren't in these early episodes. We're just doing the first couple of episodes, but Jack and Kate, and Kate eventually Lily became a star out of the show. And Charlie were the focus, and then you kind of got this next layer where they started layering Locke and Sawyer and Saeed and Jin and Sun, and there was such a long time that the passenger sitting next to Jack on the plane, Rose, we're like, what? She's a key to this whole thing. And I don't know how much up. It's just a little bit. You got a little bit about Rose.
Yep.
That helped influence the rest of the show. But I'm like, what's her story?
Oh yeah, yeah, and I feel like it was. I don't want to say it was like the first show to ever do it, but it was one of the shows that I feel like, again, a lot of other shows followed with the flashback and here's what was happening and here's where we are now, back and forth. And so you saw a little bit of that in the first episode too, of just them on the flight itself and where everyone was, and
I
Charlie.
know there's like a new book out there that because I read Jeff Jensen's article this morning
Mhm.
about Lost, and he had just read this book that was out about going back to the island 20 years later or something like that. I was like, oh, maybe I have to read that book. But I am curious since you mentioned the flashbacks, and I'm like, a lot of sitcoms. I don't know. It started with The Office, maybe I started with reality TV, right? With
Mhm.
the confessionals, and
Yes.
then seeing it play out in real time.
Right.
Like, is that a form of the way they were like, okay, how do we do this in dramatic form? We're gonna do
Yeah.
flashbacks. So instead of the confessionals, you're seeing this is what prompted this, and this is what prompted that feeling. And so it's also an interesting thing to kind of trace where this non I just lost non-linear storytelling
Uh-huh. Yes.
is really determining, how future television is going. It's
Yeah. Jeffers is asking, is it a spoiler if it's 20 years old? Yes, if you're just watching for the
for a
first time.
show like this, I think it is.
I mean, you can obviously read and see everything about the show out there right now, but if you want to watch it and experience it, then I don't want to be the one to give spoilers
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah, so for the 2-episode pilot, whatever we're calling it, episode 1
Yeah.
and 2, whatever we're saying is, obviously great. Episode 3 focuses on Kate. Episode 4 focuses on Locke. And to me, again, just to strengthen the point of you knew you were getting a mysterious, I always wanted to be into Twin Peaks. I
Mm.
never really got into Twin Peaks.
Mhm.
I didn't get into early seasons of X-Files, but I got hooked on the mythology aspect of X-Files there
Yeah.
in maybe season 4 through 6, somewhere in there, and then was like, no, I gotta watch The Sopranos on Sunday night.
Yeah.
So if those are the precursors to Lost, that again, it was. I think this show helped me realize, like, I watch TV for not what's happening necessarily, but the characters. It really established that's what I like in my entertainment is
Right.
character. Because
Right.
Mad Men, same way. Mad Men came around a couple of years later. I watch, like I said, on my TikTok all the time. I don't know why. I just get inundated with Mad Men clips, and I
Yeah.
got to figure out where it is in the show without the clip. I'm like, I don't remember. There's some things I remember, but I was like, there's a lot of things in this show that, like, was it good? Was it, not that it was bad, but like
Mhm.
memorable because I'm
Right.
not remembering, but also like, who cares? The characters are so good.
Yeah.
I don't.
Right.
All the characters are amazing and well written. So
Yes.
that's why I stayed with Mad Men.
Yes. Val is saying normally you could miss spoilers on a show this old, but now they're posting the 20th picks from different seasons, and that could be spoilers.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I mean,
then people like us are talking about it. So, you never know.
the where I'm going to be curious in this rewatch that we do. Everyone kind of talks about season 3 being that slowdown, and like we said, they decided after season 3 that they had to change how they were approaching and producing the show,
Mhm.
based on that they couldn't drag things out forever. But people always say, "Oh, these episodes of season 3 are like," and I'm like, I'm curious to watch those again
Uh-huh.
because in this format, because I'm like, is it gonna be fine? Because I
Right.
think there's a lot of good character work in there too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, and as we figure out this rewatch, I do think because there's just so many episodes that we'll have to go season by season as a rewatch probably,
Yeah.
and take some notes along
Yeah.
the way, and then discuss at the end of each season. But yeah, it's I don't know. I'm really interested to see how it all plays out and if it flows in a different way or if some
Yeah.
things make more sense than they
Yeah.
did then, because there were definitely moments, even as Mr. Snidillo and I are talking about it during the first episode, like, oh, and then doesn't this happen with this person? That was weird. That was weird. And like just thinking of those things that like maybe it's not as weird if it's just
Yeah.
consistent. I don't know. But
And the other thing that is not a spoiler necessarily, but there is very much a theme of science versus faith throughout the series, and that is something that I think we can revisit. I mean, me here listening to me and my dulcet nasal tones for 6 years, like, I like organic growth. So, I'm very much like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And where science is like, well, if you plan it out and if you plan things out along the way, this will be the result maybe that you're looking for. And so there's also that, where for me with Jack, I'm like, will you just give in to faith a little bit? Just man of science, give in to faith a little bit. So that's something I'm curious now in my older age, how I view things differently, because that's something I was definitely struggling with in the mid 2000s. Is like, do I need to like plan out my life? What do I need to do? Where I'm like, or am I just gonna keep letting things happen? And I'm gonna let. I kind of did, but I kind of landed on my feet in the right place. But there's that to talk about. Yeah, the black and white, as Val is saying here in the chat.
Yeah, I apologize for background noise. Yeah, the good versus evil that Val is also mentioning, there's just so much of that, right? Like, there are times where you want to be on someone's side, and it's like, oh, but what are you doing? Why are you making these decisions? There's a lot of that along the way with certain characters, and what they choose to do and what they choose to believe and where they choose to go. And like you said, even with Jack at times, like, come on, just be fine. Just do it. Yeah.
Louis is saying shows like this should have a complete plan. I think so many TV shows are just trying to get sold that and that's what treatments are for. And you're supposed to, have some things fleshed out. I don't know what, did not, but I think it's also, you can have a plan, but you don't have to stick to the plan either. I think if things deviate because a character breaks out, Fonzie's not wearing a blue jacket anymore, when you watch the Emmys and Fonzie and Henry Winkler heads the jukebox, you're like, this is awesome. That's my reaction anyway, because if you watch that show, you got to see that character evolve in a way that was completely unexpected, but also, for better or worse, jump the shark, kept that show alive for way longer than anyone ever intended. I know that's a sitcom, and that's different than a mythological serialized drama, but I like making that point.
Yeah, I think that there are shows that have had the plan. I think This Is Us is one of those shows that had the plan, had to do a little bit of pivoting in the middle because of the writer's strike and COVID, but for the most part, had the plan. This is how many seasons we're doing, as long as they keep having us, and this is where I want it to end up. And they kind of always knew that's where it was going.
Yeah.
But and you can argue like, oh, I wish there was more of that, or maybe you felt like it tied up nicely. But something like Schitt's Creek, I don't think they knew exactly how many seasons, but I do know that once it was the final season, I feel like that's when they really were gaining their audience, and people were so upset that it was ending, but they also felt like, well, no, we should go out on a high note and we should end it here, and we should. But that's the tricky part, right? When you're on a show and it's going well, and it's like, oh, well, they'll just keep having us for season after season after season. And it's like, okay, but maybe we did less is more at this point. And it's tricky when you're in the position of running the show or writing for the show, or the actors want to keep doing it and you have this big audience. It's like, do you just push along anyway, or do you try to wrap it up in the pretty bow?
I mean, Lewis and Val are talking about Abrams shows, and I think as you can tell by the prequel trilogy, people would say that Abrams never has a plan. I don't know if that's, again, his own, how he feels, what makes him comfortable creatively, and it leaves yourself open for all ideas, I think, and I'm just speaking from experience a little bit on that. So you take the risk, and the risk doesn't play out. So I think that is, I was never an Alias watcher. The person I was dating in the mid 2000s was an Alias watcher, and I never got it. So, but I know that something like the X-Files, like the level of investment I had was greater than or equal to, no, it was less than or equal to the amount of disappointment I had about where the show went after that with the first film and then forward. And I know there contract talks, star problems, all that stuff, it plays into things. But we've had a lot of shows over the years still that I don't know if they had a plan or not, because I didn't read as much on those shows as I did other shows. But you look at Dexter, the original series of Dexter, that show had a course. That show had a direction it was taking that should have led. It was obvious. And for them to be like, "Oh, we're not really, we can't go, we're not going to have that, you needed that last season to be The Fugitive with the sister chasing Dexter all around, with them chasing Dexter all around. Like that would have been so exciting. And however that culminated at the end, that's where it was going, was what happened when she found out, and the path that they took.
No. Don't even get me started on Dexter, because I love that show. I loved Dexter. I was rooting for someone who was killing people. Who am I? I don't even know. I didn't understand it, but I loved that show. And everyone talks about the finale of Lost. But my God, I'm so angry about the finale of Dexter. I'm so upset by that finale that there is no room in my brain to be upset about any other finale because of that one. We saw that pop up on like a ad on Netflix after we were watching Lost. I'm like, oh, should we redo Dexter next? No, we will not.
4 seasons of 1, 2, and 4. Those 3 seasons are perfection.
Yeah,
and the third is okay, but but it's just such. And Jeffers Raised is The Walking Dead, which I didn't watch, but is also like everyone I know who was super into Walking Dead just leaving so frustrated by that show. And I don't know. I mean, I know there were books, so I don't know enough about Game of Thrones, but I know people were frustrated with that, how that ended too. So before we go, Jeffers might have to close his ears and his eyes, but one of the inhabitants of Lost wished to comment about Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Dish. So I have it on my phone because I'm on a different computer today and I didn't want it to crash. So I'm going to share it with you now here at the end. Hopefully it plays and you can hear it over. All right, so here it goes.
Some of you folks probably didn't know this. Some of you did. I don't know. Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz sort of reminds me of the cork in the wine bottle, like the island. The island was the cork, the wine in the bottle was hell, and that cork was keeping hell from being unleashed. So if you're paying attention to the podcast of Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz, understand that you're partaking in more than just a podcast. It is a gate of hell.
So Mark Pellegrino there,
nice.
aka Jacob on Lost, comparing Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz, the cork in the wine bottle.
Remember that as we rewatch everything. Make the connections.
How loud was that on the? Was it low? Or?
It was a little bit low, but it was all right.
You heard what he said?
I heard what he said. Yeah. Everyone else hear what he said?
Yeah, everyone hear what he said.
We'll have to post that, separately.
All right. So the plan is the next discussion about Lost will be after we're done with season 1. Could it be a couple of weeks? Could it be a month? Could it be 2 months? We don't know.
I was like, are we picking that date now? It's probably better if we get a general idea. What if we just said a month? What if we gave everyone a month?
I mean, October. We'll talk about season 1. Next week is October. What does that mean?
Right.
Frank will be cranky during October. We'll wait till November. Maybe at the beginning of November. Well,
listen, I gotta finish this before Christmas Hallmark season starts. So
I mean, that's true. There is less time for me to watch things when it's Hallmark
movie
season, which is starting in less than 4 weeks, I think. Not for you, Jen, but for me. Before or after Dillo's Madness? Jeffers. Maybe we do have to finish that. I was like, I gotta rewatch when we had our picks from 32 to 16 so that I can remember where we left off.
I mean, at this point, would the guests of Dillo's Diz Resort like to see us just go, just tell us what your winner is and just call it a day?
What's the best story?
Yeah.
Best story came from the meetup. Hanging out with all of you. The end of Dillo's Madness.
Yay. That's the best.
So let's wrap things up here on the YouTube channel. Tell your friends, tell everyone, you know, all on a Monday morning here
Yes.
that we're binge watching Lost and join us together
Mhm.
along the way. I have to remember how to reconnect my StreamYard to the other social media outlets and
Mhm.
whether I have to pay more money for that. But
Yeah.
I'm actually very confused. So until next time, she's Jen and I'm Frank. Bye bye.
Deuces.